Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of the Messaging Maven. This time we'll be talking a little bit about what goes into a successful campaign. What are some of the do's, what are some of the don'ts, what are some of the bad examples, and what are some of the good examples? And joining me today is Anneli. Anneli is our head of support and probably the best person to actually talk about this topic, having to deal with all of these things on a daily basis. Hi Anneli, how are you?
Hi, I am very well. How are you, Uku?
I'm good. A bit tired from the traveling, but otherwise really solid. Really happy that I don't have to talk to the microphone and to the camera for 30 minutes alone for a change, which is a nice change of pace. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what your job is. What do you do? What's your day-to-day like?
So I am the head of support for Messente. I have been the head of support for roughly a year now, and before then I was member of the support team. And what I do and what the support team does day to day is that most of our time obviously goes towards the troubleshooting any issues, debugging messages, why they went where they were supposed to go, why did they go somewhere else, and why were they delayed. But our support team kind of wears a lot of hats in Messente, so we also deal with onboarding new customers, setting up their accounts, advising them on different topics. If they want to send OTPs, then you should do this. If you want to send marketing, then you should do this. And part of our team also deals with registrations across the world with the mobile operators and deals with scam messages and on kind of reducing and stopping them.
Okay. Well, I've said this before, Messente very heavily leans on its support team for both external support for our clients, which is one of the cornerstones of our business, being very proactive, providing a very fast, very reliable, very hands-on support. But we also internally rely quite a lot on support's help in helping us to do whatever we do internally, both from verification, from scam protection, as you mentioned, to everything else as well. So what's your favorite part of your job and your least favorite part of your job?
I would say the favorite part of the job is sending off the email when I've already solved the issue. The everything is fixed now email is obviously a fan favorite. But my least favorite job is probably just following up when things are not moving, when there's no information, and just trying to figure out how can I get it faster, where should I turn to, where else should I be looking at, and kind of there's a good challenge in difficult cases, but it also can get frustrating if it's kind of out of your hands and maybe with your partner or something on the configuration side. So yeah, that I think is the hardest part.
Yeah, for sure. Especially after you don't know what the issue is. So you're still looking for that issue for the majority of the time. The client wants a fix, everybody else wants it to be fixed. The account manager's breathing down your net, et cetera, right? I've said this before as well when talking about connectivity and support together as well, that it's kind of sometimes even a net negative job, because people mostly come to you when something is wrong rather than something is good, right? So you're always dealing with issues rather than successes, as compared to sales teams sometimes or customer success teams that maybe have more positive on their plate, even though we all know that sales is 90% no's anyway. So they're quite used to that frustration as well. Okay, so actually coming over to that topic, why is it important to talk about campaigns, setting them up, and everything else related to that? Why is this an important topic?
I think it's because there's a lot of nuances, and that's especially true if you're just starting your first SMS campaign, or if you're changing the format of your SMS campaign. There's a lot of nitty-gritty details that might be missed. But because we do it kind of day to day, every single day somebody sends a campaign, we kind of see what the patterns are, what are the things that people miss, and then we can advise you so you wouldn't have to worry about it so much.
Mm-hmm. So what are the most common problems or most common issues you actually stumble upon? What's usually that catches people out?
I think the most common one is that the campaign does go through and is a lot of the times successful. But because they haven't double checked the content, it ends up costing them 2-3 times of what they have budgeted for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like the special characters usually.
Special characters, or the overall, with an email campaign, you don't have to worry about the character limit. But in SMS, there is a big difference whether it's 160 characters or 161. So one space could double your budget.
Mm-hmm. What else? What are the other sort of like common mistakes people do or that catches people out?
Another thing is trying to send a campaign without going through the registrations first. So, for example, if you want to do a marketing campaign towards the US, you would have to register either a toll-free number or a 10 DLC number in order for that to pass on to the phones. If you don't do that, the messages will just end up failed, and your campaign is very unsuccessful. So, but this is something that if you talk to us, we get it registered. Maybe it takes a few days longer, but it's 100% more successful.
Do you see campaigns these days go out with, without the GDPR compliant opt-out links, opt-out functionality, things like that as well? Does that catch people out sometimes as well?
There are a lot of questions about that. We haven't, I can't recall any instances where this has been an issue, but this is something that people ask about because a lot of marketers are very educated about GDPR. They know that they have to follow it, but just a little nitty-gritty on how to best do it so you don't go your character limit, but also that your link doesn't get blocked by operators. So there's a little bit of nuance there that we can help out with.
Yeah, I guess the link question is something that pops up quite a lot as well. I was just at the London Domain Summit talking a lot about different domain names and the value of your domain and what it can bring to the table. But sometimes you can have a domain name that is so long that if you utilize it in a text message, shout out to the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, whose web URL is Mobile Ecosystem Forum. And we actually joked with James about it as well. If you want to do a campaign with that, that will significantly decrease the amount of promotional content or call to actions you can actually push into that particular text. So what quite often companies do is they will resort to something like a bit.ly or a tiny URL, which we know are also quite often used for scam. And as a result, very often filtered as well. So you sort of trip up there. So getting to a point where you're also taking into consideration, maybe I need a custom shortened domain name that's close to us. For Messente, we have msnt.ee or .com is our sort of shortened URL so that we can optimize when we send those things out. But these are some of the things that from a domain perspective, interestingly enough, you should also think of. So examples, a good example, a bad example. Do you have some examples of what good campaigns and bad campaigns look like?
I wouldn't say I have a good example of what a good campaign looks like, because obviously I don't know the end result of what they have or have not achieved with the campaign. But I can give you a great example of how a customer reached out to us recently and how we were able to kind of make sure that the messages went out smoothly. So I have this customer who has back to school campaigns once a year. The first one they launched last year, and that was only one market. And with only one market, it's very easy and straightforward. It was only to Estonia, and it was done really quickly. They reached out to us beforehand to make sure that everything is fine, and everything was fine. So they've already had this one successful campaign sent, and you would think, okay, the last one we did this, and you can send it again the next year without doing any modifications. But instead of doing that, they reached out to me and said, okay, I need to do this again, but I made some changes. I've added 2 more countries with 2 more languages. And how will that work? And we talked through it. One of the languages was, I think, Lithuanian. So it had some special characters, and also the wording was a little bit different, obviously, because it's a different language from Estonian. So the Estonian text fit perfectly into the 160 character limits, but the Lithuanian didn't. And on top of that, there were special characters. So I could advise him to use the autocorrect to replace the special characters, but on top of that, also to kind of have a look at the content. Maybe there's something you can rephrase to slim it down so you wouldn't have to pay double the price. Yes, and then we looked over the routing to make sure it's optimal. If you've done a campaign a year back, maybe some things have changed, maybe something isn't the best choice anymore. So this is something that we can review, make sure that you have the best delivery rates for your messages, and also that your contexts are in order, so that you have all of the relevant country codes, and that your account is topped up. Because that can sometimes happen, that you prepare everything, you're ready to send, you've hit send, nothing happens until you realize that your credit is at 0. So this is something to be mindful. It's a really easy fix, obviously, and you can just resend it, but it can just be a little bit frustrating when you're prepared for this campaign for so long.
So why is it important to actually pay heed to both special characters and the character limit? We've talked about it quite a lot and we know what it is, but there might be people in the audience listening or to whom this goes out to that don't know why this can have such a major impact on your business messaging campaign. Can you share a little bit about that? Why does it work that way?
It's just that if there's special characters, they make your messages to be a multi-part message. Let's say you have a one-part message, but there's a lot of special characters in it, and it ends up being a two-part message. So, and let's say you have 3,000 customers you want to send this one-part message to that looks to you like it's just saying, buy my product. And it's just one-part message. But when you actually, for example, send it in Estonian and start the message off with, hey, sõber, there's a special character in there that will double the message. And if you have 3,000 contacts, you'd expect this to be, I don't know, let's say 150 euro, this campaign. But if you double it, your budget is automatically 300 euro for one letter that you could have just replaced with something that looks identical.
Yeah, exactly. And the technical reason for why this happens is essentially that SMS as a protocol runs on the GSM character set, which is pretty much a set alphabet with set characters. And then if you send a character that isn't there, like "oo," I guess was the example in that situation, then that particular letter creates a pretty much a different coding for that message. So it goes from GSM to Unicode. And why this matters is because a GSM SMS, or in that character set SMS, is 160 characters. But if it gets translated into Unicode, then it's 60 characters per single message. So if you've optimized to 160 characters and tried to be right on the button on that, and then there's a special character in there, one message turns into 60, so actually you're sending out 3 messages instead of sending out 1. And with SMS, every single part costs exactly the same. So that's where that sort of dynamic comes in. 3,000 messages all of a sudden becomes 9,000 messages, 150 euros becomes 450 euros, and a happy customer becomes a very pissed off customer because their question is, why did you charge me so much for that message? So that's why this sort of education becomes such an important and vital part of that as well. What else? What are some of the most practical things you would suggest a business do before they start a campaign?
This is a really easy recommendation, but just talk to your support or talk to your account manager, talk to your salespeople. They've been through this one time, maybe 10,000 times, and they kind of know what to look out for, and they have your best interest at heart because they want you to succeed.
Very good. What are some of the things that people setting up campaigns ask you most often about? What are some of the most, common things that pop up? You mentioned one of the things, which was marketing teams asking about opt-out. What's the actual functionality behind that? But what else? Besides price, everybody always asks about price. What else do they actually ask about?
Surprisingly enough, very few people ask support about the price. There's more practical things on how to send things, how to create a contact list. If they're sending via our dashboard, is how to set it up so that you can customize it with names, for example. So you can have a customized campaign. how to make sure that the numbers are all valid and have the appropriate country codes, because without it, the messages will just not be delivered. I think these are the top most asked things that we get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that we've been talking a little bit more about recently in the context of campaigns is the sort of the homogenization of a company's brand messaging through business messaging as well. Mainly because if you're, let's say a retail brand that sends OTP messages in one specific form, sends promotional messages in another specific form, sends reminders in a third specific form, heaven forbids if they send it out in different sender names, different URLs, different content types, then it also opens the door up to more fraudulent activity on their behalf, mainly because people are used to differentiation within the content, the different URLs, different sender names. And the tail end effect of this, especially from campaigns perspective, is that you reach a situation where the person is already one of two things. One, they're used to getting it from different forms, so they're much more susceptible to click on a link because, it could be anything. Or B, which we see and have seen from our conversations with the logistics companies that we work as well, is that people don't trust the message anymore. So the repeat rates keep on going up. So that's why, interestingly enough, both in business messaging, and we know this from any other form of messaging out there, if you think about social media posts, if you talk about email marketing, the idea of consistent brand image is super important. But it's absolutely just as vital in business messaging as well. Consistent brand image, consistent brand messaging, making sure that when people see the message that comes in, it's as crisp, as clear, and as understandably theirs as can possibly be. And then on top of that, you can build the protection that comes from that. You can then advocate that the sender is only for that business, only for that provider, only for that operator. You can filter out all the URLs that aren't listed with that. So you can create a situation where you don't have to blacklist dangerous websites or dangerous URLs or dangerous sender names. Rather, they're already by default blacklisted and only the clean is whitelisted. So you get to a much more sort of protected brand image per se. What about campaigns with rich messaging? Now, I know they're significantly more difficult. How much have you had to deal with those these days and the dynamics of that? I know that that's not specifically on your plate, but it did fall on your team's plate quite often. Is there a huge difference between the campaigns?
There is a little bit. You can bring your brand much more strongly forward with rich messaging. But because it is a little bit, I know that it's not necessarily new, but it feels still a little bit too new maybe. So I think people are a little bit apprehensive about it still. But yeah, I think it's a great tool to kind of show your brand in a richer way than you would in SMS, especially now that we're going into the prime retail season and everybody is going to try to advertise with every channel they have available. And this might be something that not a lot of people would utilize. So utilizing that would give you a kind of an upper hand because you look more trustworthy, it feels more trustworthy, and it kind of, how do I say, separates you from everyone who's maybe sending you messages. Or I know that everybody has a spam email folder that they never open.
Yeah. The promotional folder on Gmail is something that you rarely touch. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point as well, especially because one of the things that rich messaging offers is you send out a campaign and your sender name, the image that the person sees, comes with a tick mark. And I guess that tick mark in itself, that's the reason why, Instagram accounts want tick marks, Facebook accounts probably have tick marks, X accounts, same thing. That tick mark is a sign of trustworthiness, and trustworthiness converts. It's an important part of building a sustainable brand for the future as well. So I guess that's one of the reasons why it's so effective. And from a campaigns perspective, we have that practical example from our own customers where you have a campaign on SMS. And they don't even go for all of the bells and whistles on Viber, the carousels, the fancy call to action buttons, the images, all of the different nuances that you can build into a real rich messaging campaign, and just do copy paste and still get 3x in terms of conversion from the same campaign in the same segment. Simply because it's just a little bit more trustworthy. It's more there where the customer is as well. I guess this is one of the things that we've seen more of, and what we've trying to been emulating as well is being where the customer is and being as close to them. What for you is a successful client relationship from a customer support perspective? Whether they come to you with a question or they come to you with an issue.
I think I'll go back to the example that I shared earlier. This guy who sent, or not this guy, this marketing agency who sent the messages for the back to school campaign.
Yeah.
In quite a small market, in a small capacity a year ago. And when they signed up, obviously, I was very excited. This is like quite a big campaign for a one-time campaign for this market. But then they didn't come back next month. They didn't have a campaign 2 months later. There was no campaigns going out. And I was like, okay, that was beginner's luck. It was nice that they came to us and I'm happy that their campaign was successful, but I'm sure that's that. But a year later on the dot, they're like, hi, we're here again. We want to do it again with you guys. And that kind of shows me that even after not dealing with the issue for a year, they still know where to come back because they already have this trusting relationship. They know that things work. They know that we're here to help. And they've had a whole year to seek out better prices, a different solution for them, all of the bells and whistles. Yet they didn't. They were like, I was happy with this and came back. So that's what brings home that what we do has value.
Yeah, and we've talked about this quite a bit, that we don't, you don't do business with companies, you do business with people. And if you can create a personal relationship with, just through an instance of something going wrong, issues will happen inevitably. We all know that, not all messages get delivered. There will be issues, there will be downtimes, there will be situations where, the proverbial hits the fan. But it's less about the issues happening and more about how you bounce back and how you actually perform when you need to solve those issues.
Yeah.
Anything to share? Any last words? Any thoughts about the campaigns topic?
I would say talk to your support. I know it's probably going to be my tagline from now on out, but I really do. And what I wanted to add to what Uku was saying is with rich messaging, because those campaigns go through us. We see where those campaigns make sense and where you're better off just using SMS and it doesn't make sense to use rich messaging. But there's markets where it makes more sense to use Viber and then have a fallback to SMS than to do only SMS. And that's both for getting to the people, but also it's more cost effective. So yeah, we can guide you through those questions and options.
I really like the point that you brought out, that in certain markets, there is a possibility that using a risk messaging campaign might not make sense, or a specific channel you picked out might not make sense just because market penetration isn't good enough, even though you've had great results. So yeah, I fully agree with that as well. Cool. Let us see if we have any questions today as well. What's the verdict on using emojis in SMS campaigns? What do you think? Emojis, yay or nay?
I gotta admit, I get a smile on my face if I get a very old school semicolon and bracket, a little winky face, not like a yellow one, but just a very common one. Just brings a smile on my face. I think it's a nice touch.
Yeah, so you're in camp emoji.
Yeah. So if it's aligning with your brand image that you're trying to bring forward anyway, if you're very friendly, a little bit playful, then please do use it.
Good. I do agree with that absolutely as well. And I think Janos, our CTO, does agree with that very much as well. He's very much an emoji man. So Black Friday is coming up. When should I start preparing for this particular campaign?
It depends, where are you advertising? If you are looking to send messages to Cuba, you should have started back in January. Let's get in touch for getting you sorted for next year.
Yeah.
But everywhere else, I'd say a month out. Talk to your provider, see what additional registrations you might need to do. So yeah, at least a month out, I'd say.
Good. And yeah.
Sorry, just bear in mind that hopefully everybody else does it a month out as well. So maybe a month and a week for you.
Yeah, month and a week, or even go for 2 months. Just be safe with it. Cool. Let's see. What's the seasonality like in messaging? I'll take that one for a change. So the seasonality is interesting because it very much depends on what your portfolio of business is, because we look at from the perspective of who our clients are, and from that we know seasonality. But the classic seasonality is Q1 is a carryover effect of last year's Q4. So it's still about 80-90% of peak traffic. Then Q2 is usually the lowest point. Summer seasons, most don't want to advertise that much. People are on the beach. There are certain retail brands that will, for that particular side, see a peak in traffic, say take vacations, take food, take summer drinks, sporting activities, stuff like that will definitely be on a higher level compared to, say, February, for example. And then Q3 starts picking up, and Q4 is peak messaging time. Absolutely. I mean, Black Friday, and this is one of the controversial things that we've been talking about as well, that is it necessary to make sure that you're there on Black Friday?
No, I think it does make sense to be there on Black Friday, but everybody's going to be there at Black Friday. Yep. If you advertise only on Black Friday, you will be that spam folder.
Yeah.
Because everybody's going to be on it on Black Friday. But let your customers know at the start of the week what you're planning on doing at the end of the week. This way, you kind of get ahead, kind of put a little idea, a little inception in their head of what they might be wanting or needing, or what they might be looking for. And then follow up with this. Maybe 2 days later, follow up on Friday morning saying, hi, we sent you this message. Have you considered it? Here's a link to it. And I think this is a much better way to engage it, rather than kind of storm all the customers all at once, everybody on Friday morning.
Yeah, especially considering that, depending on the market, depending on the situation, you might want to send it out on a Friday morning, but considering that everybody and their grandma wants to send out a message on Friday morning, you might actually end up in a queue. Simply from the operator's infrastructure perspective. We all know that if you want to make a call on New Year's Eve to tell somebody Happy New Year, that call is going to have a very, very slow chance of actually going through, a very low chance of going through. And it's the same thing on Black Friday really as well. There are going to be queues. And if you think, you're going to send it out within 30 minutes, your 2 million campaign, you might, and it might take 2 hours. So being actually a little bit ahead of the curve makes a lot of sense as well, especially starting at the start of the week. Start a month out, do a pre-campaign, be a little bit more cautious, a little bit smarter, take pre-orders. Prepare for a longer perspective game, not just Black Friday, because people also get Black Friday fatigue. Exactly as you mentioned, you will be in the spam folder with that. Cool, let's see what else we have. So can you elaborate on the filtering? What does it mean when messages get filtered, and how does it affect my campaign?
The messages get filtered most of the time on the operator side. So there's likely in the message that is not allowed into this particular operator's network. It could be that you have a link. It could be that you have a word in your text that is not allowed. It could also be recently, we had a big issue with this, is that you've used branded short link, and maybe you've used it for a year, but regulations change. And now you cannot use even a branded short link anymore, and you have to use the full long link for the messages not to get filtered. And also your sender name is something that could get filtered if it's, for example, In some countries, you can't just have a sender name that's info. Obviously, it's not good for your brand awareness anyway to have it just as info, but maybe you have info and some letters. Maybe it's the name of your company's info, and it might just get filtered just because of that. There's nothing wrong with your message. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing, but just because there's these parameters that we have to follow, it might get filtered, even though we have sent it out towards the operator.
Yeah, the tricky thing about that is that you won't know that it's filtered unless you actually look at the conversion and then look at the whole campaign and see, well, that didn't work. That's not as per our expectations, mainly because filtering on the operator side happens in order to prevent scam and spam. Yeah. And that means that the type of URLs, the type of sender names that are most commonly abused are also the ones that are then taken out of circulation and not sent to the actual handsets, the actual end customers. The thing is that if you always send back a reply, and we know that there are delivery reports, right? When you send out a message, you get a reply saying that it's delivered. When things get filtered out, even though it doesn't reach the handset, even though it isn't delivered to the handset, you get a reply that it's delivered. Yeah. Mainly to make sure that the scammers don't get wind of it very quickly that they're actually being filtered out. So you won't actually know until you send out a campaign, it ticks through, and then you realize, well, why wasn't that as successful as A was advertised? Because we've been talking about the effects of how good business messaging campaigns are. And from the second perspective, it's not as effective as your last campaign, for example.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's take one more question. How much spam do you see in a day-to-day life in support?
Spam. Let's say we see it daily. It's there's not a day that goes by when we're like, oh, you can put a tick on the wall today. No spam has been seen. I wouldn't say it's very prevalent, but there is a lot going around.
Is there a ton of spam that comes into you in the forms of live chat as well? I've seen some very interesting conversations.
Yes, there's a lot of interesting things. People sending us selfies for no good reason.
Oh, lovely.
With no context, no questions, just a bit of face, which is, lovely to wake up to, unless they put an inverted filter on it, which is a little bit disturbing. But yeah, I think us as a message provider, we don't always see when spam is spam because we don't have the information of what the opt-in on the customer side is. So what might look like a very legitimate marketing campaign on our side may be spam because they've never signed up for it. And that's the difference between marketing and spam is for marketing, they want to have it. They've agreed to have it. For spam, you're just sending it.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Another question? There's more good ones today. Those are lovely. What are the security and safety measures in place for data protection in Messente? Maybe since legal tends to be my forte, I'll do some of the things. So from a data sort of protection perspective, of course, GDPR compliance is one of the most important things that we're always focusing on, making sure that there are things like limited access, there are things like secure development environments, that there are checks we do on clients when their campaigns go out. Is this opt-in there? Do you have the necessary documentation, the verification of accounts, et cetera, et cetera. But also things like data mitigation. So making sure that we try to store as little data as possible. And then, of course, recovery as well. If there is some form of an incident that inevitably these things will happen from time to time, how fast do you recover? The processes for actual detection, then resolution and post-mortem of seeing what happened, how do you solve this quickly, rapid communication with the clients, the ones affected, immediately understanding where it is. And this also requires a very thorough understanding of the monitoring of your entire infrastructure as well. A lot of people don't understand what goes into real monitoring of your security in your company. It means not only just understanding whether the clients or the partners you work with are compliant and using auditing rights and things like that to go through there, but it's also the understanding of, can I check every single session and every single particular instance for a security breach? Having something called a CM system, which is a security information and event management system, having that in the background. None of these are foolproof. but it's the important thing of keeping the platform safe. And then the next aspect after that is, how do you actually combat spam? On top of working with operators and on top of working with them in terms of sharing data between us, like what are we seeing on different forms of scam and spam? What are we seeing as some of the more, dangerous issues? It's also the fact of working with the Estonian police, sharing information with them back and forth to making sure that there's less spam and fraud working around. In Estonia, working with the national infrastructure for the internet and the governing bodies of that, and actually sharing the data directly to them. So these are the instances of spam and scam we're seeing. These are some of the websites that should be shut down because these are obviously fraudulent and malicious in their intent. And then working with the brands as well, working with the Banking Association in Estonia. And then on top of that, what we can do in-house, the filters that we build on top of content to find those fraudulent text messages, to find those fraudulent URLs, to see whether somebody is abusing a well-known brand like DHL and actually reaching out to them, even if they're not our customer, and saying to them, hey, your brand is being abused at this particular point in time. These are the instances of what it's being done. These are the templates that are being done, and creating this awareness, because how you actually protect consumer data and how you actually protect brands as well is doing a lot of communication between the different parties involved, between the operators, the ISPs, the actual service providers like us, and the brands themselves, to try to create this as secure of an environment as possible. And then, of course, education as well, because at the end of the day, one of the reasons why we do so much work on LinkedIn and so many educational posts, why we have this entire community, is to educate, because it's about the end customers as well, and end customer liability as well, because at the end of the day, if you choose to click on the link, you choose to click on the link. And we just have to bring more awareness to the fact that you shouldn't click, which is also an important part of this. A long answer, but fraud is my baby. Let's take a last one as well. Curious about your take on using automated support system, bots, AI. How do you see Messente evolving in this topic? Bots, AI, what's your thoughts on this?
I think where we are as a support team in Messente at the moment, it does not make sense to us to use AI and bots, because we are going for this kind of hyper-personalized approach. We want the people that you are talking to know, what have you turned to us previously, what has been your pain point, what is important to you. First and foremost, but that's not saying that we don't use automated systems at all. We have someone to say that we'll be back in a few hours when you message us on chat. So we're not against it. But currently we don't see the need for it just yet. But as it is evolving, we'll keep our hand on the pulse to see how we can use it to make our customers' lives easier.
Mm-hmm. I guess a big question for us is that personal approach to things. How personal can you get with AI at this point in time? How much can they truly advise you to the extent that we find necessary, at least in our business as well? Okay, very good. Any final thoughts or ideas?
Just a final tip. If you have prepared your campaign, if you have talked to your support, you're all ready to go to launch a campaign for tens of thousands of people, try it on just 5 before you launch the whole thing. Just see how the first 5 go. Start small. If those are delivered and they're actually delivered to the country that you are intending this campaign for example, if you're an Estonian company, all of your employees are Estonian, but you want to market for UK, find numbers in the UK to test this out on, to make sure that the connection goes through before the big day and before you launch tens of thousands of messages.
Very good. Thank you for that. And thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And I hope you found it valuable. And I'll see you next time at another event at the Messaging Maven. Have a good one.